Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Principal Apportionment Data Collection webinar. My name is Karen Moore, and I'm the Administrator of the Charter Apportionment and District Reorganization Office, and I'll be one of your presenters. Also with me is Elizabeth Deerstein, who is the Administrator of the Principal Apportionment and Special Education Office. Elizabeth will be the second presenter in this webinar. Good morning. Today we're going to highlight for you the changes we made to existing Principal Apportionment data collection screens and show you the newly developed screens that we created to allow us to collect the data for the new local control funding formula. We'll be covering a lot of information today, and for many of you it might be a lot of new information. But don't feel like you need to take copious notes, because a recording of the webinar and handouts will be available for viewing by sometime next week on our website. Also, if you didn't already know, the Principal Apportionment data collection software was posted to our website last week, as well as the Data Reporting Instruction Manual, which includes a lot of the same information we are covering today. Before we get into the material we want to cover today, I'd like to review the agenda for the webinar. We'll start with a few housekeeping items, then we'll make some comments about the new local control funding formula, referred to as LCFF, and the new data elements we'll need for LCFF funding. This information will be presented in a PowerPoint format. We've already made the PowerPoint available to you for download before the presentation started, and we'll post it to our website along with the actual webinar within a week or so. Then we'll review some of the resources and documentation that are available to assist you with using the software and completing the data entry screens. And lastly, we'll go into the Principal Apportionment data collection software and highlight some of the changes to existing screens and the new data collection screens. As we mentioned in our announcement, this webinar will not cover the tax or CALPADS data collection screens. Okay, on to housekeeping items. There's a question and answer panel at the top of the screen. If you bring down the drop-down menu at the top right of your screen, hopefully it's the top right, you can click on the Q&A. Please send any questions to all panelists. We have staff available to answer questions during the presentation, but because of the large number of participants in this webinar, please limit your questions to the data collection software and process. If you have any questions about how LCFF works, you can send those questions to the LCFF email address on the screen. We will post the most frequently asked questions and responses with the webinar and presentation materials. Also, we are very close to capacity on this webinar. Hopefully we won't have any logistical problems during the presentation, but if you haven't already, I recommend that you write down the phone number that's on the screen under the audio issues. In the event that you lose sound, you can call in directly on this number. The last bullet in the link is where the webinar materials will be posted after the presentation. I'll give you a few seconds to write down the phone number and the website address. Okay, moving on to the next slide, we'll spend a little time explaining how the new local control funding formula works. I apologize if this part of the presentation is redundant for some of you, but we felt it was necessary to make sure everyone in the audience had a basic understanding of LCFF before we proceed to the data collection screens. We will just be giving a high-level review, so if you think there's an element of LCFF that we missed, don't worry, we haven't forgotten it. We just aren't going to talk about every facet of LCFF funding today. Also, we will focus on LCFF funding for school districts and charter schools. LCFF for county offices works a little differently. So, the first bullet says LCFF was signed into law July 1st of 2013. In addition to establishing a system for new local control and accountability plan, which we won't be talking about here, a new funding formula was also created. This new funding formula replaces revenue limits, charter school block grants, and many individual categorical programs. This new formula is intended to simplify school finance and increase flexibility and accountability at the local level. Over time, barring additional changes, this new formula will be simpler than the old funding system, but for now it's new and there's a learning curve for everyone, so it may not feel simple to you yet. Hopefully the upcoming slides will demystify LCFF funding a little bit and help you understand the changes we made to the data collection screens. We plan to provide more detailed information when we transition to the new funding formula at the second principal apportionment, or P2. The new funding formula prescribes certain grade span funding rates that will be used to calculate LCFF funding, and it also incorporates other funding elements as well. We'll explain this calculation a little later, but we will be referring to it as the target entitlement or target calculation. Since the state cannot afford to fund everyone at this target level this year, there's a phase-in or transition period estimated to be 8 years for school districts and charter schools, where you will receive funding based on a transition formula. As of the 13-14 budget, the estimated total statewide need to fund all school districts and charter schools at their new target level is about $18 billion. The amount appropriated in the 13-14 budget for this purpose was $2.1 billion, or 11.78% of the estimated need. You can see that the funding estimate for 14-15 is much higher. This estimate is from the 2014-15 governor's budget that was released in January, but it's a proposal at this point, so as always, is subject to change. So where we are now with LCFF, here's a recap of what's happened so far this year. Because our data collection software had to be modified for LCFF, and the software we use to calculate entitlements must be changed to align with LCFF, we were not able to allocate funding at the advanced apportionment, or the first principal apportionment, known as P1, that was certified in February. Neither of those apportionments reflected any of the LCFF formulas. What we did do, however, was allocate a portion of that $2.1 billion in new funding in both the advanced and P1 apportionments. At P1, we also adjusted entitlements to reflect the 2013-14 average daily attendance, or ADA, and property taxes. Because the additional funding was allocated based on the old formulas and not the new, we advise that you should use caution in building this funding into your spending plans because it will likely change once LCFF is calculated. For P2, you can look forward to seeing your 2013-14 entitlement for the first time using the new LCFF formulas. Note that LCFF did not change the apportionment process. The same apportionment periods exist as before: advanced, P1, P2, and annual. So now we'll talk a bit about the components of that target calculation. This slide shows one of the calculations that we will perform to determine your LCFF funding. We refer to this as the target calculation. Once LCFF is fully implemented, all school districts and charter schools will be funded the same way based on this formula. There are a few more calculations that are worked into this formula, but in the interest of keeping it simple here, we will focus on the big ones. The first row shows the grade span base rates. Remember, the LCF formula is based on uniform funding rates depending on the grade level of the student. This is similar to how the charter school block grants used to work. There will be a set amount provided for K3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12 ADA. These amounts will be adjusted each year by a cost of living adjustment, or COLA. Note that all ADA is funded by grade span. This is one of the calculations that caused us to revise our data collection software. We still use ADA, we just collect it and fund it in a slightly different way. In addition to these base grants, there's an additional amount provided to districts and charters for supplemental and concentration funding. These are reflected in the second and third row. This funding is based on the number of unduplicated students in your district or charter that are determined to be low-income English learners or foster youth. And by unduplicated, we mean that if a student is low-income and an English learner and is a foster youth, that student will count only once. We will divide the number of unduplicated students in your district or charter by your total enrollment to get an unduplicated pupil percentage. Note that enrollment and unduplicated students are new data elements being used to calculate apportionment. We will be getting these counts from the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or CALPADS. In this first year, there are some data elements we need for funding that aren't yet built into CALPADS, so we are collecting them through this data collection process, and we'll show them to you later. Back to the slide, the supplemental grant in the second row will be calculated by multiplying your percentage of unduplicated students by 20% and then multiplying that by your adjusted base grants. Now moving to the third row, if your unduplicated pupil percentage is over 55, you will also be eligible for a concentration grant. We will take the amount over 55% and multiply that by 50%, and then multiply the resulting percentage by your adjusted base grant. For example, if your district had an unduplicated percentage of 85%, we would take the 85% minus 55%, which is 30%, multiply that by 50%, which is 15%, and we would multiply that by your adjusted base grants to give you concentration grant funding. We will lay that all out in the exhibits when we post them at P2. One last note about concentration funding. This is the one place that charter schools differ from, or this is one place that charter schools differ from school districts, in that the concentration percentage for charter schools is capped at that of the district in which they are physically located, or if they are located in multiple districts, then the district which has the highest percentage. This is why we're collecting physical location information from charter schools, which we'll get to later. There are some additional add-ons in the formula that we won't get into here, but if they apply to you, they will also increase your funding. They are necessary small school funding allowance, targeted instructional improvement block grant, home-to-school transportation, and economic recovery target funding. Now moving on to the calculation of the floor. As I mentioned, we will be phasing in the LCFF target calculation for an estimated 8 years. The target calculation will be compared to what we call a floor calculation for all districts and charters. The first step in calculating the floor will be calculating each entity's 2012-13 funding. For school districts, we will take their 12-13 revenue limit funding and divide it by their 12-13 ADA. For charter schools, we will take their 12-13 general purpose block grant funding and divide it by their 12-13 ADA. Next, we will sum the funding you received in 2012-13 for 54 categorical programs. This funding was already calculated and allocated in the advance in P1 apportionment, and there's a spreadsheet on CDE's principal apportionment website that shows this. So now to calculate your 13-14 floor funding for both districts and charter schools, we will multiply your per ADA rates from 12-13 and multiply them by your 13-14 ADA. For districts, we will use the greater of current or prior ADA as usual. We will then add the categorical funding as a lump sum with no growth, except that the categorical block grant portion for charter schools will continue to be adjusted for changes in ADA. This is basically the floor calculation. There are some other factors, such as minimum state aid, that we won't be talking about today. So next, we're going to show you the transition formula. This slide shows a simplified look at the calculations we will be making during the transition period. It is not to scale, but should convey what will be happening during the transition period. For each entity, we will take their 13-14 floor funding that we calculated in the last slide. Then we will take the target calculation from 2 slides ago. So you can see those are the 2 boxes on the left-hand side. We will compare what every district and charter would get under the old floor and the new target formula. And the difference between the two is the amount you need to get to your target or your need. We will figure out how much we would need to fund every district and charter at their target. We will look at how much is available for this purpose and then proportionally allocate the amount available. Remember from a previous slide, the estimated statewide need is $18 billion, and the amount available to fund this need is $2.1 billion. So using these estimated numbers, we would fund about 11.78% of each district and charter school's need. We call what the LEA receives that year for their need their gap funding. Each year we will adjust both your floor funding and your target funding for ADA changes, and each year we will provide more gap funding, so you will get closer and closer to your target during the transition period. In the second set of bars on the screen, the 2014-15 floor funding is basically the actual funding from 13-14 adjusted for ADA. So the district in this example is growing because you can see the 14-15 floor is bigger. But again, remember, it's not exactly to scale. It's just to illustrate how the formulas work. The new target calculation in 1415 will also be increased for changes in ADA and for COLA, and then more gap funding is applied in the actual funding, that third box there. While everything seems to be moving in an upward trend, the gap being provided in these examples exceeds the amount of COLA being provided, so we will get closer and closer to the target calculation during the expected 8-year transition. We will go through this multi-step process each year until everyone is funded based on their target. Once your agency is funded on the target for the year, you will continue to be funded on the target. We will provide more details of these formulas when we release the P2 software, but in simple terms, that is how the funding will work. And these are the different calculations that we will be performing each apportionment period. To perform these calculations, we will use a lot of the same information as before, with just a few new data elements. So this next slide shows you an illustration of how some of the ADA and CALPADS data will be moving between entities. You'll see 3 columns of data in the chart. The first is County Office of Education in blue. The middle column in green is school districts, and the column on the right in orange is charter schools. Starting with the data used to determine the county LCFF funding in the first column, you will see that the 3 boxes represent the different types of students served by the county office. The first box of students is juvenile court schools. The second box is what we call the county-funded non-juvenile court. The criteria are in the bullets in that second box. The ADA generated by the students meeting the criteria in the first 2 boxes are the only types of students for which county offices of education will directly receive funding from the CDE, at least for this year. The bottom gray box in that first column is the remaining students that are provided instruction at the county office, but for whom ADA will be reported by the COE, and the ADA will move to the district of residence so that the funding will flow to the school district. Now, moving to the data used to determine district LCFF funding in the green column, the first box is the students that are served and reported by the district. These students stay where they are for funding purposes. The second box under the district column is the students that were provided instruction by the county, but the funding flows to the district. We assume districts and county offices have had conversations about how the county offices will be compensated for this instruction. The last column in orange reflects the students that are served by a charter school. Starting at the bottom with the white box outlined in orange, this is where the vast majority of charter school students will fit. These are students that are served by the charter and the funding stays with the charter. Now moving up to the first gray box, this represents students that are in a county program charter, which is operating a juvenile court type of program. The ADA for these students will flow to the county office, and the county office will receive the funding under the county LCFF formula. This is consistent with how this category of ADA was funded under revenue limits. The second gray box under the charter column will work the same way. These are students in a county program charter that meet the criteria to be funded at the higher funding rate, but the ADA will also flow to the county and be funded through the county office. I hope you enjoyed those moving arrows because that was the most fun that we've had in a while. Thanks to Elizabeth for creating them. Okay, I've talked about how the ADA will be served by one entity and funding will flow to another, but I haven't mentioned that the CALPADS enrollment and unduplicated pupil data will have to move at the same time to ensure that the calculations are balanced. There are several new data collection screens that were added to ensure that we are reflecting the appropriate enrollment and unduplicated counts in the entity that will be credited with the ADA for these students. So I hope this helped you understand how the formulas work, and you can refer to this after we're done if you need more clarification. So next, Elizabeth will show you some of the resources and documentation that are available to you.
Thanks, Karen. At this point, we're going to move away from the PowerPoint, so you're going to see some changes on your screen. Just bear with me for a moment. And I'm going to go ahead and open up CDE's website and get you to the main page. Okay. Before we go into the software, I want to open up CDE's website and point out where you can download the software, as well as a couple of resources that will be helpful to you should you have questions when submitting your data. To get to the data collection software, click on the Finance and Grants right above our mission. Next, on the left-hand side of the web page, in the green box, click on the Software and Forms link. If you are familiar with this page, you may notice some changes. You'll see that the name of the software has been changed from the Revenue and Attendance Data Collection Software and is now called the Principal Apportionment Data Collection Software. We've made this update because the word revenue in the title was in reference to the former revenue limit system. Should you need access to prior versions of the software to submit prior year corrections, you can still get there through the revenue limit link at the bottom of this page. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Principal Apportionment Data Collection link. On this page, you're going to find a link to download the software. And underneath this link, you'll see a header called Resources and Documentation. I'm going to go through a few of those for you today. Posted on the Known Problems, Fixes, and Workarounds page, you'll find information on known issues with the software and how to resolve the issue. We will continue to update this page as needed. So far, the largest issue is operating the software with Windows 7. We provide instructions on how to change to the XP compatibility mode and strongly suggest that all users do that before entering data. Later in the webinar, I'll demonstrate how to change your compatibility mode. It's quick and painless, I promise. Should you come across a problem that is not addressed on this page, please contact us so we can help you resolve the issue. I'll click on the back button and return to the main Principal Apportionment page to point out a couple more resources. The next two links under Resource and Documentation are the Download and Installation Guide and the Software User Guide, which have been updated for this release of the software. Since they are largely the same, I won't open those links. We've also made significant updates to what's previously known as the help file. This information is no longer accessible from within the software. Instead, when you select Help from within the software, you'll be taken to this page, and the help file information has been converted into a standalone Word document similar to the user guide and is titled the Data Reporting Instruction Manual. I'll open the file so you can see how it's organized. Just give a minute for it to open. As you can see from the table of contents, the document is broken up by LEA type, and instructions are provided for each data entry screen. And they are hyperlinked, so you can go right from this table of contents directly to the screen you're looking for, should you have questions. When you get to those, at the beginning of most of the data entry sections, you'll find a heading called Highlights, where we've incorporated a lot of the information we will cover for you today. Familiarity with both the Software User Guide and the Data Reporting Instruction Manual is essential to successfully operating the software and entering the correct data elements. The next item I'd like to draw your attention to is our Due Dates webpage. To access, I'll click on the back button and return to the main Principal Apportionment Data Collection software page and click on the Due Dates link. This is a newly created web page. We added this page because we thought it would be helpful to explicitly say what data elements are due when, since we have so many new data elements and entry screens you may not be familiar with yet. Within the data entry screen column, we have identified if the screen is new or what the screen formerly was titled to help translate you from the old software to the new for the user. This page has been organized in the order of the approval responsibility in the software. So charter schools are listed first, then school districts, and last County Office of Education screens. Within each LEA type, you'll see data elements that are due April 15th, separated from the data elements that are due May 1st. This was done to highlight those items that are due first. County Offices of Education and charter schools have data due to us on April 15th. And the remaining data elements for the P2 apportionment are due May 1st. Also noted on the tables are the due dates for the annual apportionment. Given that we have a very large captive audience, we'd like to take this opportunity to stress how important it is that we receive the data by the due date shown on this screen for P2, especially since this is a whole new process for us. And with performing these calculations for the first time, we really need everyone's help in ensuring a successful P2 certification. The calendar of key deadlines will continue to be published with our prior year correction due dates, and the 2014-15 calendar should be released within the next couple of months. Another new web page that has been created is the contacts page. You can access this page from either the main principal apportionment data collection web page or by clicking on the contacts link at the top of the due dates page. This page is also organized in the same format as the due dates page by LEA type and entry screen. On it, you will find contact names of CDE employees that will be able to help you with technical software problems or questions about the data entry for a particular screen, should the software user guide or data reporting instruction manual not answer your question. Going back to the main principal apportionment data collection software page, at the bottom of the page you'll see a placeholder for the webinar recording that, as Karen mentioned, we'll be posting sometime next week. I'd like to point out one last resource, which in my opinion is the most important resource, and then we'll move on to what you signed up for, the demonstration of the data collection software. I'm going to select Finance and Grants from the breadcrumb link at the top of this page. Then under Highlights, in the middle of the page, select Principal Apportionment, which will take you to the main Principal Apportionment page. In the middle of the page, you'll see information on how to sign up for the PACE listserv, which has been in operation for about 5 years. Those that are already signed up know that we use this listserv to communicate principal apportionment information, such as notifications of when we certified the advanced P1 or P2, and that funding exhibits are available for viewing on our website. Reminders for data submission due dates is also sent out, as well as notifications on when we release software and any other relevant and timely information. There are just shy of 1,200 members, and we feel like there should be well over 2,000 members. So if you are not signed up or know of a colleague that would benefit from the information we share through this listserv, please pass on to them this website link because it is available to anyone who wants to join. Okay, now on to the Principal Apportionment Data Collection software. Before I open up the software, I'm going to show you how to change the compatibility to XP for users that operate Windows 7. After you've installed the software, it should appear on your desktop. Locate the software and right-click on the Principal Apportionment Data Collection shortcut on your desktop. Select Properties. Next, click on the Compatibility tab. Click on the Run This Program in Compatibility Mode button, and then from the drop-down list selection, select XP Service Pack 3. Select Apply and OK. And that's all. Now I'm going to open up the software and comment on changes that apply to all users, and then Karen will begin the charter review. The login screen works the same as it did under the previous version of the software, and you'll notice the software name has been updated on this screen. Today we'll be demonstrating the software as a county user to allow access to all the entry screens regardless of user type. As mentioned in the webinar announcement, today's session will not be a training on the software functionality because the structure of the software did not change. Should you have a question about how to use the software or need a refresher, you can review the software user guide or contact CDE for assistance. Okay, let's log into the software. A new feature of the software is that when a user logs in, all the entry screens applicable to the period selected will appear in the grid at the bottom of the screen. Under the prior version of the software, you had to select revenue or attendance first, and then the entry screens appeared. A feature that was included in the previous versions of the software and is not included in this release is the ability to print blank reports. While beta testing the software, we ran into problems with the operation of this feature. So a decision was made to remove the blank reports to not hold up the release of the software. With that said, we've already heard feedback from several LEAs about the removal of this functionality in the last 2 days and have updated the known problems, fixes, and workarounds webpage with an alternative for this year, and we will look into a more long-term solution for next year if needed. Now I'll show you how the help function works in this software release. If you select help from either the menu on the main screen or from within a data entry screen, you'll be taken to the Principal Apportionment Data Collection webpage where all the resources I just reviewed for you are available. So closing back and going back into the software, just a couple of closing comments. As you work through your entry screens, you'll find that we updated, added, and deleted edit checks as needed. In addition, the certifications have been created for all new entry screens, and the language on the certification page for all other screens have been updated, with the exception of the tax entry screens, which will update next year. Now I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and she is going to walk you through the charter school screens.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We formatted this portion of the webinar to align with the structure of how the data will be transmitted to CDE. So we're beginning with the charter school data collection screens. Then Elizabeth will cover the school district screens, and she'll wrap up with the county office screens so that participants can sign off once we have covered their area. There are 8 total entry screens that are available to charter schools. 7 of them are available for the P2 period, where we'll start. The 8th screen is only available for the annual period. When you log on as a charter school, only the charter school screens will be available to you. For this first charter school screen, we're going to log on as Youth Build Charter School in Inyo County, because this school will have access to all of the features in the first screen. Sorry, we just have to log back on. Okay. So the first screen we're going to look at is Attendance Charter School. We've selected the P2 period, then we logged on as Inyo Youth Build. The first thing I want to mention about this screen is it replaces the 4 Attendance Charter School block grant screens, EHS, Unified, SBC, and SBC, which was Statewide Benefit Charter Schools, and COE for Countywide Charter Schools. So if you were using one of those screens before, you would use the Attendance Charter School screen now. The first thing you're going to notice is the screen opens too small. You should reposition the screen to the top of the monitor, then grab the bottom corner of the screen and drag it open so you can see the whole screen at once. You're also going to notice that there are 2 tabs at the top of this screen. There's the regular ADA and multi-track, and then there's an ADA allocation button at the bottom of the screen. Some screens have multiple tabs, like this one at the top, and some have only one. In any event, this screen opens to the regular ADA tab, so that's where we're going to start. The functionality of the software is the same, so we're not going to go into the save, check save, adding new records features of the software. But if you have any questions about that functionality, you should refer to the instruction manual in the user guide for help. Okay, now on to the regular ADA tab. The first thing you need to look at are a couple of general questions about your charter school. They're in the top middle part of that box. You're required to answer these questions to the extent they are applicable to your school. The first question is, did your charter cease operation during the fiscal year? And you would click yes or no. The second question is this a charter in its first year of operation? Yes or no. If yes, then you would provide the date when the instruction commenced. You will notice that the date field is not available unless you answered yes to the first year of operation question. Then we're going to ask you, does your charter school operate multiple instructional tracks? Yes or no. If your charter operates a single track, you must enter days of operation during the annual period only. If your charter school operated a single track and it ceased operation during either the P1 or P2 period, you must also enter days of operation during that period. If your charter school operates multiple tracks, you must enter ADA at both the P2 and annual period on the multi-track tab in addition to the regular ADA tab. Note that previously you only had to report multi-track attendance at the annual period, and it's now required at both P2 and annual. So moving on to the rest of this regular ADA screen, you will see that the screen is in a grid format rather than linear format, but the individual data elements are the same, except that kindergarten and grades 1 to 3 are combined where they used to be separate. Where you had to report ADA by grade span before, including how much of your ADA was classroom-based, that hasn't changed. You can just see it all on the screen at the same time now. One more minor change is that the K-3 grade span column now also includes TK in the title. TK stands for Transitional Kindergarten. We added TK to the title to clarify that TK ADA should be included in the K-3 reporting. So now on to the multi-track tab. If you indicated that you operate multiple instructional tracks, you must report ADA by track at both P2 and annual. Days of instruction for each track are only required at annual unless the charter ceased operation during the year. Note that charters operating multiple instructional tracks are no longer required to get a board waiver, but they are all required to follow the new requirements in Education Code Section 47612. Also, multi-track ADA is now part of the K-12 audit guide. This is just a helpful tip. It really isn't related to the software. For charter schools and unified districts, you will notice that you no longer have to report ADA by resident, non-resident. That's because there's no longer an adjustment for basic aid unified districts or unified districts with conversion charter schools. So that's one workload that will go away here. The ADA allocation button at the bottom of the screen is there for countywide charter schools, which are schools that were authorized pursuant to Ed Code Section 47605.6. We selected Youthville Charter School to view this screen because this screen is only available for countywide charter schools. If you're not a countywide charter school, that button won't be visible to you. So you will see that we can't enter this screen until we have saved ADA, so we will go back to the original screen and enter some data. Okay, now that we've saved ADA, we'll go back to the ADA allocation screen. So it's going to prompt us to add a record. The software will prompt us to enter the first county and district of residence and to report ADA. We will repeat this step and report ADA for every different district of residence. This is not a new exercise for countywide charter schools, so you should be familiar with this. This step was built so that in lieu of taxes can be calculated for the district of residence for countywide charter schools if the district is basic aid. So that's all for the attendance charter school screen. To view the rest of the charter school screens, we're going to pretend to be Placer County because Placer County has all of the other screens that we want to show you. So we have to exit out of the software, go back in as Placer County. So you will see as Placer County, we're going to select the period again, and then select the entity type. So as Placer County, we could be a county, district, or a charter school. So we've selected charter school. And then we're going to be Ackerman Elementary School because we want to show you next the attendance charter school all charter district screen. You can see that the basic screen works the same way. It's in a grid format with regular and multi-track tabs on top. You also start with the same general questions at the top. Multi-track rules are the same as mentioned for the attendance charter school screen. You will see that this data entry screen is longer than the last one we saw. That's because all charter districts are required to report attendance by resident and non-resident. This is true on both the regular ADA and the multi-track ADA tabs. That's because all of the all-charter districts will receive declining enrollment funding for their resident ADA. And for us to determine this, we must collect ADA separately for resident and non-resident. Something that is new for all charter districts is while data input is required for each individual school in the all-charter district, The data will be combined and it will be funded as a single entity. This will be true for all charter districts. All charter districts will be funded the same way, where in the past some received revenue limit funding and some received block grant funding. So now the only option is LCFF funding, so everybody will be funded the exact same way. There will be no in lieu of taxes for all charter districts, just straight property taxes like a school district. And there will still be no necessary small school funding option for all charter districts. So that's all we'll talk about with the all charter district screen. Next, we're going to go to the attendance charter funded county program screen. This is to be used for county program charter schools that were authorized pursuant to Ed Code Section 47605.5, and this form replaces the attendance county operated charter schools program COE form. We will first select Placer County Pathways Charter School, because that's a county program charter. We will then open the Attendance Charter Funded County Program screen. You will see when you open this screen, the first thing you need to do is to add a new record, because all of the ADA needs to be reported by District of Residence. You will click Add New for each District of Residence record. After you add the first record, you will be prompted to answer the same general questions that we discussed on the previous screens. You will then enter all of the ADA for that District of Residence. When you are done with that district, you will click Add New for each new district. You will notice that the same general questions pop up in each individual record. It shouldn't do this. We should only ask these questions once. This will be fixed next year. But for this year, these questions pop up in each record, but the answers from the first record will automatically populate to each subsequent record, so you have to only answer the questions once. Note that any changes you make on a subsequent record will update or supersede the initial responses on the first record. You will also notice that the ADA is reported by type of program. Remember, this screen is for charter schools that operate county programs. It is for the students that do not meet the eligibility criteria to be funded at the higher rate pursuant to Education Code Section 2574 C4A or B. Previously, these were referred to as juvenile court or Type C students. The ADA of these students that do not meet these criteria will be reported in the attendance COE charter screen, which we'll get to in a few minutes. I'm sorry, the ADA of the students that do meet these criteria will be reported in the attendance COE charter screen. If you think you're operating a county program charter school but are not operating, if you think you're operating a county program charter but are not operating a county program, it's possible that you are really operating a county-wide charter school. We recommend you carefully read Education Code Sections 47605.5 and 47605.6. If you need to change your charter type, please call CDE before reporting your data for P2, and we can talk to you about it and possibly change your designation. The special education categories on line A3 and A5 are funded based on P2, using days attended divided by days taught. The special education extended year category on line A7 is funded based on annual attendance, again using days attended divided by days taught. The remaining categories will be funded based on the P2 period, but they will use a fixed divisor. This is how the attendance was calculated when you previously reported ADA using the Attendance County Operated Charter Schools Program COE form. But if you previously reported ADA on the block grant COE form, that was not using a fixed divisor, so this may be a change for you. One last piece of information about this screen. While we do ask if your charter school operated multiple instructional tracks in one of those first questions that you saw, we are not collecting ADA by track for this screen at this time. We will add that feature in a future release. But for now, if you report ADA in this screen and you operated multiple tracks, we may be calling you to ask a few follow-up questions. So the next charter screen that we'll look at is the Attendance COE Charter School screen. We'll stay in Placer County Pathways Charter. I apologize, we have a squeaky door, if you hear that. So this screen replaces the old Attendance COE Charter School Revenue Limit form. If you operate a county program charter and have ADA for any students that meet the eligibility criteria in Education Code Section 2574, C4A or B, you would report that ADA here. These are the students that are either in a juvenile hall, home, day center, ranch, or camp. They're on probation, they're probation referred pursuant to Welfare and Institutions Code Sections 300, 601, 602, or 654. They're on probation or parole, or they are expelled for any of the reasons in Education Code Section 48915A or C. So when you open the screen, you will need to answer the same general questions. Then you will start entering your ADA. You will notice this screen looks different than the other charter ADA screens, as the ADA is grouped by elementary and high. The ADA is not funded under the same funding model as all other districts and charter schools. Instead, the ADA for these students will roll to the County Office of Education, and the funding will flow to the county office just like it did before. These students will be funded under the county office LCFF formula. If the charter school operates multiple tracks, you will need to report ADA by track as you would for any other charter school. So that's it for that screen. Next, we'll move back to the Basic Aid Supplement Charter School. We'll stay in Placer County, but we'll pick another charter school. So the first thing you'll see when you enter this screen is a pop-up message that says if you change any of the attendance charter school data, you must revalidate the Basic Aid Supplement Charter School screen. You will then get a pop-up that directs you to add a new record. This screen looks like the other screens we've already previewed. It's the same grid format. It's a multi-record screen, meaning you have to enter information by district or residence, so you must add a separate record for each district. This screen is used by charter schools to report ADA by district of residence if their school district is basic aid or if the district was taken out of basic aid status because of the charter school. If you're not sure whether your charter school should complete this screen, you should talk to your sponsoring school district. And districts, if this applies to you, you should make sure your charter school reports this information to us. For more information on the Basic Aid Supplement, you can refer to Education Code Section 47663. There were some changes in how this funding is to be calculated, both from the perspective of capping the amount of funding to be provided and also changing the calculations to accommodate the LCFF. The reporting of ADA for the Basic Aid Supplement is largely the same, except that the ADA must now be reported by grade span in addition to by district. This will likely be more data entry than before, but this detail is necessary for LCFF funding purposes. The Basic Aid Supplement is still a multi-record screen. First, you add a record, then enter the county and district of residence, and then enter the applicable ADA by grade span and the portion that is classroom-based. The total attendance by grade span for the cumulative district record must be less than or equal to the ADA reported on the attendance charter school screen. The rest of the charter screens that we're going to look at are all new to accommodate information that was not part of the old block grant funding formulas, but is part of LCFF. So we'll next go to the Charter School Adjustments to CALPADS data entry screen. We'll go back to the County Program Charter School, Placer County Pathways Charter, because only County Program Charter Schools will have to enter data in this screen. We mentioned that the students served in a County Program Charter that meet the criteria in Education Code Section 2574, C4A or B, will be reported by the charter school but funded in the county at the county office level. Likewise, the unduplicated pupil counts for these students are reported by the charter school and CALPADS, but these counts should move to the county as well to align the attendance and demographic data used for LCFF funding. We already know the students enrolled in a juvenile court school because these schools have a separate designation in CALPADS, but we don't know which students met the criteria in Code Section 2574 C4A. We're hoping this information can be reported in CALPADS next year, but for now we have to collect it through our principal apportionment data collection process, hence this screen. So it's a very straightforward screen with only two data elements. You should report the enrollment and unduplicated counts for the students that met those criteria on CALPADS Information Day, Sometimes we call that Census Day as well. While the screen is straightforward, it may take a bit of time to go through the CALPADS counts, identify the students based on this criteria, and sum those totals. So these counts will be subtracted from the charter school's enrollment and the duplicated count, and it will be added to the county office's counts. This is one of the data screens that are due back to us April 15th. The next screen we're going to look at for charter schools is the Charter School Physical Location screen. This screen is required for all charter schools except for all charter districts. This screen is used to report each school district in which the charter school is physically located or has a school facility. It's another pretty straightforward screen, and you just add records and report every district that you are physically located in from the drop-down menu. You first pick the county, then the district. Enter as many districts as may apply to your charter school. We expect that most charters will only report one district, and that district will be the same as the authorizing district. But that will not always be the case, so we're requiring each charter school to report this information. Even if you have only one location, because district boundaries overlap for elementary and high school districts, you may still be located in two separate districts, so you should enter both. This information will be used to cap concentration funding for the charter school, and it will be used to determine the base funding to use for new charter schools. This screen is only available for the P2 and P2 corrected mode for 13-14. In future years, this screen will likely be required for the P1 period. This data is also due back to us by April 15th. So that's all with that screen. There's one more charter school screen we're going to show you, and it's only available in the annual period. So we're going to go to annual, and we're going to click on a charter school. Then we're going to show you the charter school audit adjustments to CALPADS data screen. This screen is used to report audit adjustments to your CALPADS data, either enrollment or unduplicated pupil counts, or both. The screen may also be used to report corrections or adjustments that occurred after the close of the year that were not certified by CALPADS prior to June 30th of the current year. These corrections must be accompanied by either an audit report or an auditor's letter of concurrence before CDE will bring in the corrections. These adjustments will affect the LCFF calculations only. We won't be making these adjustments in any of your other CALPADS data. The first row in the screen is for all charters to enter their data. You would just report the net change to your enrollment count and the net change to your unduplicated pupil count. Remember, this is still as of Information Day, meaning the first Wednesday in October of 2013. The second two rows are for county program charter schools to report adjustments to the enrollment and unduplicated pupil counts for the students that are funded through the County Office of Education. So those bottom two should only be available to you if you're a county program charter. So that's it for the charter school screens. Now Elizabeth is going to show you the district data collection screens.
Thanks, Karen. Before we move on to the district screens, we understand we're having some technical difficulties with the question and answer feature, and since we have staff so eagerly standing by to answer your questions, we're going to take a few minutes to see if we can resolve the issue with our technology staff, and we'll get so we're going to place you on hold. You may see some stuff on the screen that we're going to fix, and then we'll get back to you. Thank you. Please hold. Okay, so we're back now. It looks like we've resolved the question and answer feature, and they're starting to come in. We apologize for that. So now we're going to move on to the district data entry screen. We're going to log into Kern County because within that county I'm able to select different districts to gain access into all the school district screens I will demonstrate for you. All the entry screen grids for school districts will appear once the district from the LEA menu for the period you have selected, and I'll review them in the order in which they appear. There are a couple screens on the grid that I won't review because there were minimal changes, or they only affect a very small number of districts. In developing the software, we did work with the district advisors from your County Office of Education on the changes you will see on these screens. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to select Kern Union High School District. And the first screen we're going to look into is the Adults in Correctional Facilities. In this screen, you will report the ADA and participation data entry screen for the Adults in Correctional Facility program. This is one of the few categorical programs that remained intact. This entry screen does not pertain to all districts and is only open to those that are program participants. The ADA collection for the program has been moved from the Adults tab in the Attendance School District entry screen in the prior version of the software and is now to be reported on line A1 of this screen, along with the certification of participation collected on line A2. This screen is identical for districts and county offices of education participants and is pretty straightforward. The next screen we'll move on to is the Attendance School District entry screen. This screen is open to all school districts and is where most school districts will report the majority, if not all, of their ADA. The first thing you may notice is the screen opens too small, so if so, you should grab the bottom corner of the screen and drag it open so you can see the whole screen at once. The screen opens to the regular ADA tab. The format of the screen is significantly different from how school district ADA was previously collected in the two columns of elementary and high school linear format. With the expansion of reporting all ADA categories by grade span, the grid format will be easier for the user to enter the data than the previous linear format. On each line, you'll be able to enter data and tab to the next column. All grade span columns are open for data entry regardless of the district type. So please use caution when entering data to make sure you're reporting ADA in the correct grade span column, as it will affect the district's funding. I'll review for you some highlights about the restructuring of this data entry screen. There are no longer ungraded ADA categories, as all ADA is reported by grade span. This is because under LCFF, each ADA generates a different amount depending on the grade span of the ADA, unlike revenue limits, which was one base revenue limit per ADA amount. The Data Reporting Instructional Manual provides guidance on how to determine a grade span for ungraded special education students and also information on how to report ADA for combination classes, such as a 3-4 combo class. As you can see, we've collapsed several ADA categories into the regular ADA line A1 that were previously reported separately. Opportunity, home and hospital, special day class, and continuation education are categories of ADA that are part of the greater or current or prior calculation when determining funding and are funded as of the P2 attendance reporting period. Since a statutory reason does not exist to collect the ADA separately, they have been incorporated into line A1. The next change is the extended year special education line A2 ADA line previously fell after the non-public, non-sectarian schools and licensed children institution categories, but we have placed it right below the line A1 because it is also part of the ADA we use to determine the greater, current, or prior ADA for the district. However, unlike line A1, that ADA is as of the P2 attendance reporting period. The extended year special ed is as of the annual reporting period and therefore needs to be reported separately to CDE. The non-public, non-sectarian schools and licensed children institution ADA lines have also been combined and are reported now together on line A3 and line A4 for extended year for those categories. Community Day School ADA remains a separate reporting category because it is funded based on annual and is not subject to the greater of current or prior. You'll also notice the K3 grade span column includes a reference to TK, which stands for Transitional Kindergarten in the title. And we added this at a request of some LEAs just to clarify that TK ADA is to be reported with all other kindergarten ADA. The next tab in the Attendance School District Entry screen is the Other tab, which used to be called the Adults and Other tab. With the move of Adults in Correctional Facility ADA to its own entry screen, the tab has been renamed. The data collected in B1 to B3 related to independent study and transitional kindergarten are not new. Lines B4 and B5 have been added to collect ADA for audit reasons since we've collapsed the continuation education and opportunity ADA categories into line A1, regular ADA of the previous tab. The last tab in the Attendance School District Entry screen is the Prior Year Adjustment tab. This data was previously collected in the District Revenue Limit Adjustment Entry screen of the prior software. A district should only complete this screen when certain conditions related to when there is movement of ADA between the district and one or more charter schools, or if the district is involved in a reorganization or territory transfer. Total ADA, not net ADA, should be reported in the appropriate grade span column for pupils who were enrolled in the prior year. The data reported in this screen will be used to adjust the district's prior year P2 ADA before the calculation of the greater or current or prior year ADA is done. This concludes the highlights of the Attendance School District Entry screen. We're going to go back to the main entry screen grid, and you'll see 3 more attendance entry screens shown on the grid. Attendance Supplement School District, Attendance Basic Aid Choice, Court Order Voluntary Pupil Transfer, and Basic Aid Open Enrollment. These entry screens are only open to a select number of districts. And the ADA reported in these screens should not also be reported in the Attendance School District Entry screen. All of the changes that we just reviewed for the Attendance School District screen are applicable to the changes made in these entry screens. So we've done the exact same thing in these 3 screens as what we did in the Attendance School District. So we won't be going into those. The next screen on the grid is the class size penalty screen, and there have not been any changes to the reporting of class size penalty data. So we will not review that data entry screen, and we'll move straight to the necessary small school program screens. You'll see on the grid a separate elementary and high school entry screen. And before I show you each of the screens, I'd like to mention some points that would apply to either. Not all school districts will enter data into these screens. School districts with less than 2501 ADA that have geographically isolated school sites with less than a specific amount of ADA, 97 for elementary and 287 ADA for high school, and elect to be funded under the necessary small school model, use these entry screens. The ADA reported in these screens by school site also needs to be reported at a district level in the Attendance School District Entry screen. As a reminder, the software has dependencies built in between the necessary small school entry screens and the Attendance School District screens. If you have not entered data in the Attendance School District screen, or if data has been entered but did not pass the check-save process, you will not be able to check, save, and export necessary small school data. The Data Reporting Instruction Manual provides further guidance on the interaction between these entry screens. There haven't been any changes to the funding selection and COE certification entry screens that you see below those two, so we won't cover those in today's presentation. But just as a reminder, 3 elements are needed for an eligible school to receive necessary small school funding. A county certification is needed that the school qualifies for funding and under what education code. In addition, an election to be funded as a necessary small school instead of the LCFF grade span funding model is needed. And last, completion of either the necessary small school or necessary small high school data entry screen for each school site. Okay, now I'm going to open up the necessary small school elementary screen. And we're going to select a district that's eligible for this funding or that has access to the screen. As with the other screens, you may want to click and drag to increase the size of the window for the necessary small elementary screen before you begin entering school-level data. Similar changes, such as collapsing ADA categories, have been made in this screen, as was done in the attendance school district screen. In lines A1 to A3, you'll report current year necessary small school teacher and ADA data by grade span for each necessary small elementary school site. Even though the necessary small school funding model does not use ADA by grade span in its funding in the determination of funding, we need ADA reported by grade span, so necessary small school ADA can be excluded when we're doing the calculation of the grader of current or prior year ADA for all other district ADA. Section B only needs to be completed if the school was not funded as a necessary small elementary school in the prior year. Let's move on to the necessary small high school entry screen. We're going to go down and select a district that has access to the necessary small high school screen. This screen is pretty straightforward, and the layout is almost identical to that of the necessary small elementary school screen. As with the elementary screen, data is reported by school site for each high school, and Section B is only applicable if the school site did not receive necessary small school funding in the prior year. We're going to close this screen and move on to a new screen that have been created for LCFF. The last school district entry screen I'll show you is the new school district audit adjustment to CALPADS data entry screen. To access this screen, I'll change the period to annual, as it is only available during the annual or annual corrected period. Only districts that have audit adjustments to report for district enrollment or for the district's enrollment or unduplicated pupil count that were not included in the district certified CALPADS data will use this screen. The data affects the district's unduplicated pupil percentage calculation used to determine the supplemental concentration grants under LCFF. Adjustments reported in this screen will not be used to modify previously certified CALPADS data for any other purpose. The data entered should be the net change in CALPADS enrollment and unduplicated pupil count identified in the audit finding or the auditor's letter of concurrence. So this is a pretty straightforward screen as well. And again, the first time you'll need it is annual if it applies to you, or the annual corrected period. So you will not need to complete this for P2. Before we conclude the district section, I would like to remind you that when you view your ADA, unduplicated pupil, and other funding exhibits at P2, you'll see that students that reside in your district but are served by the County Office of Education will affect your district's LCFF funding. These are the district-funded county program kids in the flow chart we showed you at the beginning of the webinar. The kids that moved over, the blue arrow that moved the kids from the county to the district. This happened before under revenue limits, but at the state level, we automatically flowed the funding back to the County Office of Education, which will not be the case under LCFF for P2. Districts should work closely with their county offices of education to understand how the ADA and CALPADS data for these students will flow through the school district or residence. You can also find a letter on our Principal Apportionment webpage that describes the impact of these kids, along with some frequently asked questions. Now we're going to move on to the County Office of Education data entry screen. So we're going to stay in Kern County, but I'll change to COE and the LEA menu, and also change back to the P2 period. In terms of how ADA is reported to CDE, LCFF probably had the greatest impact to county offices of education, as illustrated in the flowchart we reviewed at the beginning of the webinar. I'll go in the order in which the entry screens appear for the P2 period. The first screen listed is the Adults in Correctional Facilities screen. We won't review this screen since it's the same for school districts as it is for counties, and we just reviewed the district screen. As with districts, the screen is only available to participating counties. So the first county office screen we will review is the Attendance COE entry screen. The screen will open to the Elementary and High School tab. If you recall how this screen previously looked, under the revenue limit system, you'll see that several program categories of ADA have been eliminated. This is because ADA for this screen is now reported by type of student versus type of program. The ADA reported in lines A2 through A4 will be used to determine a county offices of education's alternative education grant funding under LCFF. This is ADA for any student, regardless of program, that attends a juvenile court school operated by the county office, or is probation referred, on probation or parole, or expelled pursuant to specific reasons in the Education Code. One last mention that will apply only to a select number of counties is that out-of-state tuition ADA on line A1 is being collected for 13-14 only. Additional detail as to the reason for the collection and how the ADA will be used is provided in the Data Reporting Instruction Manual. The next tab in this entry screen is the Adults and Other tab. The Adults in Correctional Facility ADA reported on line B1 of this screen is for the ADA that was previously funded through the County Special Schools and Classes exhibit and is different from the categorical program Adults in Correctional Facility ADA reported in that entry screen, in the first entry screen that on the list. B1 is grayed out for all but 3 county offices. Contra Costa, Marin, and Riverside are the only counties that can enter data there. Handicap adults, line B2, is also grayed out for most counties. Glen, Inyo, and Santa Cruz are the only counties that can enter ADA there. And they will find more detail on both of these categories and how the ADAs will be used in the Data Reporting Instruction Manual. The next lines, B3, B3, 4, and 5 are not new. They've been there. They've been on that screen and under the old, so there's no change to those. We'll now move on to the Attendance District-Funded County Program Entry screen. This screen was previously titled Attendance County Operated Program COE, and the ADA reported in this screen was what was referred to as County Funds Transfer ADA under the old revenue limit system. When we concluded the district section, I mentioned the letter CDE published at the end of February, along with frequently asked questions that talk about this particular ADA and transitioning to the local control funding formula. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to go to our website and download the information. And if you need help finding that, send us a note and we can send you the exact website link of where you can find it. Under LCFF, counties will report ADA by district or residence for students they serve that are not funded through the county's alternative education grant, but rather the LCFF funding is provided to the district of residence. Some new additions to this screen that were previously collected in the Attendance COE data screen are homeless, which was added to line A1 and is the reference to 1981D, and opportunity schools and classes, specialized secondary schools, and technical agricultural and natural resource conservation schools were all added to line A5. A county should report in this screen all ADA by grade span for classes run by the county that are not reported in the attendance COE entry screen. Because this ADA will be funded under the district's LCFF model, it must be reported by grade span. Data reported in lines A1, A2, and A5 are funded as of the second period, while lines A3 and A4 are funded as of the annual period. The Data Reporting Instruction Manual provides guidance on how to determine grade spans for ungraded special education students and information on how to report ADA for combination classes for this entry screen. While for the purposes of LCFF funding, the ADA reported in this screen will be credited to the district of residence, the ADA reported in this screen will continue to be credited to the County Office of Education for the purposes of determining the county's lottery funding, AB 602 funding, Prop 39, the mandate block grant, etc. We're now going to move on to the COE adjustments to CALPADS data. This is a new entry screen for LCFF and is available in the P2 or P2 corrected periods. This data is due to CDE on April 15th. LCFF statutes require that the CALPADS enrollment and unduplicated pupil count data for students served by the CDE, but for whom the LCFF funding flows to the district of residence, to be transferred to the district of residence, as we do for ADA. And this all goes back to that flow chart that Karen talked about at the very beginning, the blue and the colored chart, the blue-orange. Because that functionality won't exist in CALPADS until 2014-15, this adjustment to a COE certified CALPADS data will be captured at the county level through the principal apportionment data collection software for 13-14 only. The data reported by a county in this screen will not be reported back to the CALPADS system, nor will a county see these adjustments reflected in any CALPADS data. The adjustments that are reported in these screens is solely being made for the purposes of calculating LCFF funding. COEs will report in lines A1 and A2 by district of residence the enrollment and unduplicated pupil count as of Information Day, which is the first Wednesday in October, students that are not funded under the COE's Alternative Education Grant. Note, the CALPADS data is a point-in-time count, which is unlike ADA. It is possible that a county will claim ADA for a student in the district-funded county program screen that was not enrolled in the county on the first Wednesday of October, and therefore that student should not be included in the county's adjustment in this screen. The data reported in this screen will be a deduct from the county certified CALPADS data and an addition to the district of residence data, which will affect both the county's and the district's unduplicated pupil percentage we use when calculating the supplemental and concentration grants for LCFF. The transfers will be reflected on the unduplicated pupil exhibits that will be published as part of the P2 certification. We'll now move on to the COE LCFF adjustment screen. This screen was previously titled County Revenue Limit Adjustments. This screen is pretty simple and straightforward and retains those local revenue offsets in line A1 and A2 and expenditure reimbursements, line B2, that continue under LCFF. Only those counties that have data to enter need to export a file to CDE. If the county does not have any information to report, a file with zeros does not need to be submitted. Out-of-state expenditure data is being collected on line B1 for those counties that might receive a one-time reimbursement should the proposed legislation for one additional year be enacted. Additional detail is provided in the Data Reporting Instruction Manual. The last county office entry screen I'll show you is the new COE audit adjustments to CALPADS data entry screen. To access this screen, I'll change the period to annual as it is only available during the annual or annual corrected period, so you won't have to worry about this for P2. Only counties with audit adjustments to report for the county's enrollment or unduplicated pupil count that were not included in your certified CALPADS data will use this screen. Adjustments reported in this screen will not be used to modify previously certified CALPADS data for any other purpose. The adjustments reported on lines A1 and A2 will affect the county's unduplicated pupil percentage calculation, and the adjustments reported on line B1 will affect the district of residence's unduplicated pupil percentage calculation. All data reported must be substantiated by the county's audit report or an auditor's letter of concurrence. Depending on the type of student, a county will either report the adjustment in the county-funded student, Section A, or district-funded county-served student, Section B. The need for separate sections is because of the funding that flows to the district or residence for certain students served by the county. To access Section A, the county will need to add a new user as the County Office of Education. So we'll need to go in, since we're in Kern County, we'll need to go in to select Kern County as a county. And then in the drop-down list, you're going to see Kern County Office of Education as an LEA. When you add that record, you'll be able to enter data in lines A1 and A2. When you need to enter data into line B1, you'll add a new record and select whatever district or residence is applicable. In both sections, the user should enter the net change in CALPADS enrollment and unduplicated pupil count identified in the audit finding or the auditor's letter of concurrence. That's all we wanted to review for the county screens. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Karen for a couple of closing comments. And I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint.
So that concludes our webinar. It was a lot of information, and if you missed anything, we'll be making the information available for you. We provided one last slide with a recap of the resources we have available to assist you. As a reminder, all of the webinar materials will be available on our website, hopefully within a week or so users can refer back to them as they begin using the software for the P2 data submission. We'll send a message through the PACE listserv when that's posted. We will continue to work to improve our instructions and documentation. So if something is not clear, we would like to hear your feedback. Please send an email with suggestions to pace@cde.ca.gov. It's there in the middle of the page. If you know of others that would benefit from what we've covered today, please pass along this information to your colleagues. And good luck in posting your data and getting your data ready for us. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.